We're back, everyone! Okay, so this video is going to be a little bit different because I'm not going to be giving you some tips and tricks like I usually do or some quick mind hacks from the world of psychology and behavioral science. That stuff is all well and good, but really, behavioral science is so much more than that. Behavioral science is so much more than just learning about cognitive biases and heuristics. Instead, behavioral science, when you learn about this field, it changes the way you view the world at a fundamental level. And that's really what I want to talk about in today's video. In today's video, I'm going to tell you 3 ways in which my view of the world has changed on a fundamental level. So let's do this, shall we? Okay, so the first way that my worldview has changed is that I understand that everybody is a product of their environment. What I mean by this is that the surroundings and the context that we live in has a huge influence over the decisions that we make and therefore the outcome of our lives. In some ways you can think of this as a negative because it takes away from our sense of autonomy, that we have control over our lives, and instead when you view the world this way you kind of think, well, I'm basically at the mercy of my environment. To some extent that is true, but on the flip side it can actually be very positive and practical too. The way that it's positive is that it takes away from blame culture. It says that the reason why you're unproductive or poor or unhealthy is probably not because of some fundamental flaw in your own character. Instead, you're probably just being pushed towards that kind of negative behavior because of your environment. I think that should help people be both kinder to themselves and also to others when trying to judge why people's life outcomes are maybe not in the place that they want them to be. And the other reason why I like this way of viewing the world is because it can teach us where we should be directing our energy when we want to change our behavior. Instead of trying to look for internal motivation-based solutions to our problems, instead by taking this view that you are a product of your environment and that changing your environment is the most effective way to change your behavior, it can help you redirect your energy to more productive tasks like removing friction to behaviors that you want to do and adding friction to behaviors that you don't want to do. And in my opinion, that's a much better way to go about problem solving than trying to look inwards. Look outwards. Okay, the second way in which I think I and other behavioral scientists think differently is that we think in terms of behaviors rather than attitudes. I'll tell you a story to illustrate this point. So one of the first consultancy jobs I got was working with Warwick Estates at my university. Warwick Estates managed the student accommodation on campus, and they were running a campaign to try and get students to reduce the amount of energy and water they were using in order to live sort of more sustainable lives while they were at university. So they asked me to come in and help them design some interventions to try and get students to be more sustainable, but one of the first things they told me when I walked in the room was, students just don't care enough, and that's why they're being unsustainable. Now, this was really surprising to me because I was already somebody who was thinking in terms of behaviors, but what I realized is that that's not really an intuitive way to think about problems. We intuitively think that our attitudes shape our behaviors, so if somebody was to act sustainably, it must be because they care about the environment. But actually, our research in behavioral science doesn't support that idea. People who care about the environment still act unsustainably. People who care about their health still engage in unhealthy activities. So really, attitudes and behaviors just don't correlate very well. So instead of doing what they initially thought they wanted me to do, which was design an intervention to get students to care more, instead I told them, let's break down the sustainable behaviors that we're trying to encourage into individual behaviors that then we can tackle one by one. So rather than thinking, oh, let's try and get students to care more about the environment in general and that will lead them to be more sustainable, I said, well, what are the specific things that you want them to be doing? We want them to be not preheating the oven for longer than necessary. We want people to turn their devices off standby when they're not using them. All of these things were the actual behaviors that we're trying to change, and when you break down a big problem into these individual behaviors, suddenly it feels a lot more manageable and tackleable. And so in my work with them, we brainstormed a whole bunch of different ideas, but one of my favorites from the day was just having a simple checklist when students left their room. A little checklist, so before you leave your room, think, have you turned off the lights, turned your devices off standby, turned the taps off? These 2-second checklists that the students had to read before leaving the room would help them to be aware of their behaviors and hopefully then turn off the lights, turn off their devices and switch off the taps before they left the room, and therefore they were being more sustainable. And really, as I've learned more about the field, this theme keeps recurring over and over again. What I've come to understand is that we so often misattribute the reason why people misbehave. We often think it's because they don't care enough or they just don't have the right attitude, but in reality it's probably because their environment isn't setting them up for success, which relates to that first point I mentioned earlier. So as behavioral scientists, we tend to tackle problems in terms of individual behaviors rather than general attitude problems. And in my opinion, when you break down these big problems into individual behaviors, they seem way less intimidating and much more manageable, and so I just think it's a way more practical way to view the world. And the third way that learning about behavioral science has changed the way I see the world is really just having a very strong internal belief that people can change. Have you ever heard phrases like, oh, people never change, or a leopard can never change its spots? These common phrases make you believe that people are incapable of changing their behaviors, their personality, or just generally their life trajectory. But from behavioral science, we know that this isn't the case. In fact, we know that people's behaviors are very malleable if you just design their environment in the right way. And so, in my opinion, this is a very optimistic and positive way of looking at the world, because it can give you faith in humanity to better itself, and you can also give you confidence in yourself too, to know that you aren't just stuck where you are, but in fact that you can grow and develop and be better if you just use the right tools. Okay, so those are the three fundamental ways in which learning about behavioral science has changed the way I see the world. Do you agree, disagree, yes, no, maybe so? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll have a look at them and join the conversation with you. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye. These 2-second checklists before the students had to check before. These 2-second checklists, oh my goodness.